Welcome back to another dark dive into Fallout lore. Today's confession is different from anything we've explored before. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Great War and who really controls the Wasteland. This isn't about Vault-Tech's experiments or the Enclave's schemes. This is about a power you've never heard of, operating from a place you'd never suspect. Imagine discovering that every storm you've cursed, every settlement that froze, every crop that died from impossible weather was deliberately engineered. Imagine learning that somewhere beneath the ice, a corporate empire has been waiting for 2 centuries, watching, planning, preparing to claim the surface world they helped destroy. Imagine finding out that the apocalypse isn't over. It's just been postponed. This is the confession of someone who helped design your extinction, someone who spent 40 years optimizing weather systems to keep you desperate and divided, someone who finally understood what they were doing and tried to stop it, even knowing it would cost them everything. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. Now, let me tell you about the 6th great power, the one hiding beneath the ice, the one that's been controlling your weather for 200 years, the one that's coming for you in less than 8 years. Are you ready? Because once you hear this, you'll never look at a radiation storm the same way again. My hands still shake when the temperature drops below freezing, not from cold, but from memory, because I spent 43 years in what they called the Antarctic Free State before I understood we weren't surviving the apocalypse. We were its architects. I trade under the name Samuel Winters now. You'll find me selling salvage in Diamond City and Good Neighbor most days, moving between settlements, keeping my head down, always. Wearing that heavy coat even when summer hits the Commonwealth and everyone else is stripped down to their underclothes trying to stay cool. People think I'm eccentric, the crazy trader who's always cold. Let them think that. It's safer than the truth. The truth is that coat isn't fashion and it isn't madness. It's survival. My body was genetically modified for temperatures that would kill you in minutes. And every day in this wasteland heat feels like I'm slowly burning from the inside out. My organs are failing. My blood chemistry is wrong for this climate. I'm dying by degrees every single day I spend on the surface. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you where I really come from. Because when you understand that, you'll understand why every storm in the wasteland, every frozen settlement, every crop that dies from unseasonal frost, every radiation storm that rolls across the Commonwealth is no accident. It's all by design, and I helped design it. In 2031, when the world's corporations saw the resource wars coming on the horizon like a slow-motion train wreck, they didn't prepare to survive the apocalypse. They prepared to win it. And they built their ark beneath the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica, where no nation could touch them, where no satellite could see them, where no government had jurisdiction. The construction took 15 years, tens of thousands of workers brought in on cargo ships, told they were building research stations, told they were part of a scientific endeavor. Most of them never left. The ones who asked too many questions disappeared into the ice. The ones who kept their heads down and did their jobs became the founding population of what would eventually be called the Antarctic Free State. I wasn't alive then. None of my generation were. I was born in Dome 7 in 2242, a 3rd-generation Antarctic. My grandmother was part of the original corporate migration, one of the engineers who helped design the thermal regulation systems that keep the domes habitable. She used to tell me stories about the surface world when I was a child, before she disappeared into the board's private medical facilities for what they called routine age reversal treatments. Stories about cities with millions of people, about forests and deserts, about wars and peace treaties, and things called elections where common people somehow got to choose their leaders. I thought they were myths, fairy tales to entertain children, the same way you might tell stories about dragons or magic. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized every word she told me was true, and by then, she wasn't around to ask about it anymore. We had technology the surface never dreamed of. Cold fusion reactors the size of filing cabinets, each one capable of powering a city block indefinitely. They worked on principles that pre-war scientists had barely theorized. Magnetic containment fields holding deuterium at temperatures and pressures that sustained fusion reactions without fission byproducts. Clean, limitless energy, while the surface world was still burning oil and coal and killing each other over uranium deposits and petroleum reserves. The domes were magnificent, each one a self-contained city housing anywhere from 50,000 to 200,000 people. Transparent aluminum ceilings, 100 meters high, showing the aurora australis dancing above the ice sheet, casting green and blue light across artificial parks and gardens. Artificial suns mounted on gimbaled tracks, providing perfect daylight cycles matched to pre-war human circadian rhythms. Hydroponic gardens producing food that made pre-war cuisine look like gruel, using genetic modification techniques that boosted nutrition and flavor profiles beyond anything that had existed before the bombs fell. The underwater cities were even more impressive. Vast complexes carved into the rock beneath the ice shelf, connected by pressurized tunnels that stretched for kilometers. Manufacturing centers producing everything from medical equipment to weapons systems. Data centers storing the entirety of human knowledge, backed up and redundant, preserved for future generations. Training facilities where Antarctic children learned everything from atmospheric science to military tactics. We were preparing for something. I just didn't understand what until it was too late. I grew up believing we were humanity's saviors, the last bastion of civilization in a world gone mad. The board of directors, our hereditary corporate oligarchy, 12 families who've controlled Antarctic policy since before the bombs fell, passing down board seats like medieval kingdoms. They told us the surface was populated by genetic inferiors who'd failed the ultimate market test. Natural selection, they called it, with the confidence of people who'd never had to struggle for anything in their lives. The strong adapted and thrived beneath the ice in our perfect domes. The weak burned on the surface in their irradiated wastelands. I was indoctrinated from birth to believe this. We all were. Our educational systems were designed to reinforce the ideology. History classes taught us that the Great War was inevitable, the natural result of inferior minds making inferior decisions. Biology classes taught us about genetic optimization and how Antarctic modifications made us superior to baseline humans. Economics classes taught us that the free market had spoken, and the Antarctic corporations had won by preparing, while others had failed by hoping. Philosophy classes taught us that survival was the only meaningful moral framework, and that we had survived while others had not, which proved our moral superiority. I believed all of it. Why wouldn't I? It was the only worldview I'd ever known. I was 20 when I earned my doctorate in atmospheric manipulation, graduating top of my class from the Institute of Climate Sciences in Dome 3. It was a proud moment. My father, a mid-level administrator in the Resource Allocation Department, attended the ceremony with tears in his eyes. My mother, a hydroponics specialist, gave me her grandmother's lucky pendant, a pre-war artifact she'd kept hidden for generations. My sister, still working on her undergraduate degree in oceanic thermal dynamics, told me she was jealous of my assignment to Project Long Winter. Project Long Winter. Even the name sounded noble, majestic, important. They gave me a position as a junior climatologist, working under Senior Director Vasquez, a woman who'd been managing weather systems for 40 years and had the kind of reputation that made junior researchers afraid to breathe too loudly in her presence. I thought it was an honor. I thought I was helping secure our future by managing weather patterns that would make the ice citadels more efficient, that would protect our domes from the worst of Antarctica's natural climate extremes. My first assignment was simple: monitor satellite feeds from the northern hemisphere, track storm formations, input data into our predictive models. I spent 8 months doing basic analysis work, learning the systems, understanding how our satellite network functioned. The satellites themselves were marvels of engineering, hardened against electromagnetic pulses, powered by advanced solar panels that could function even in the dim light of polar regions, equipped with sensors that could detect everything from air pressure to radiation levels to thermal signatures. It took me 15 years of working in that department to realize Project Long Winter wasn't just managing local weather around Antarctica. It was managing all weather, everywhere, on the entire planet. Let me tell you about the satellite network, because understanding it is crucial to understanding everything else. 93 orbital platforms survived the Great War. Not by luck, not by accident. They were designed specifically to survive nuclear war, hardened against electromagnetic pulses that would fry normal electronics, redundant power systems that could switch between solar, nuclear, and even backup chemical batteries. Self-repairing mechanisms using nanotechnology that could patch hull breaches, replace damaged sensors, and maintain optimal functionality 2 centuries after launch. Communication systems that used quantum encryption protocols that even the Institute's best coders probably couldn't crack. From a control room in Dome 1, buried under 300 meters of ice and rock, those satellites can do things that would seem like magic to surface dwellers. They can direct radiation from the upper atmosphere to concentrate it in specific regions, increasing background radiation levels and making areas uninhabitable. They can generate storms by manipulating temperature differentials and air pressure systems across thousands of kilometers. They can freeze coastal regions by redirecting cold polar air masses toward the equator. They can bake entire regions into deserts by disrupting normal precipitation patterns and increasing solar radiation exposure. The storms in Far Harbor, I designed those. Personally, spent 6 months perfecting the formula based on board directives that came down from levels above my clearance. The condensation patterns that create that perpetual fog, the radiation distribution that makes it deadly to unprotected humans, even the way the fog interacts with local geography to create pockets of higher and lower concentration. I calculated wind speeds, humidity levels, precipitation rates. I ran simulations until the model was perfect, until it would create exactly the conditions the board wanted. They told me it was a defensive measure, keeping the surface hostile, they said, preventing the radiation from dispersing too quickly and allowing the surface to become hospitable again before we were ready for Operation Hostile Takeover. We needed the surface weak. We needed the population low. We needed humanity desperate and scattered and unable to organize effective resistance. I believed them. I wanted to believe them, because the alternative was understanding that I was helping commit ongoing genocide. The Divide's perpetual windstorms happened because I input coordinates into our atmospheric manipulation system. Someone gave me a set of numbers, told me to generate a persistent wind pattern in that region, told me it was important for long-term atmospheric stability projections. I didn't question it. Why would I? I was a good corporate citizen doing my job. I ran the calculations, programmed the satellites, initiated the sequence. 3 months later, I heard rumors through the intelligence network about some disaster in a place called the Divide, about earthquakes and storms, about an entire community destroyed. I didn't make the connection then. I didn't want to. The capital Wasteland's radiation, storms that blow in from the glowing sea, they follow schedules I helped create. Maintenance cycles for our satellite network meant we could only generate high-intensity weather events during specific windows. So I built a predictive model that optimized storm generation for maximum impact with minimum satellite wear. The result was a pattern of radiation storms that hit the Commonwealth just frequently enough to keep the population stressed and scattered without becoming so frequent that people adapted completely. The Mojave's unusual heat patterns, the drought cycles that devastate crops, the unseasonable frosts that kill entire harvests across the Commonwealth. Every extreme climate event in the Wasteland traces back to my department, to my calculations, to my algorithms, to me. I remember the day I truly understood what I was doing. I was 35 years old. I'd been promoted to senior climatologist after Director Vasquez retired. My office had a window that looked out over Dome 7's main square, where thousands of Antarctic citizens went about their daily lives completely unaware of what we were doing to the surface. I was reviewing my latest project, a system that would generate unseasonable frosts across what used to be the American Midwest, when a junior researcher brought me a requisition form, standard procedure. I signed off on thousands of these forms. This one requested satellite time to verify the results of my frost pattern on surface settlements. I approved it without thinking. 3 days later, the same researcher brought me the results. 17 settlements wiped out, estimated 7,000 dead from starvation when their crops failed. Photographic evidence from our surveillance satellites showing abandoned farms, empty streets, bodies in the snow. I threw up in my office trash can. Then I approved the project for full implementation. Asterisk. What would you do if you discovered your work was responsible for thousands of deaths? Would you stop? Or would you convince yourself it was necessary? Think about where that line is for you and share in the comments. Asterisk. But that's not even the worst part. Want to know what the worst part is? The board calculated in 2076 that nuclear winter would terraform Earth to Antarctic optimal conditions. Permanent ice coverage expanding from the poles toward the equator. Low population density, making resource extraction more efficient. Resources concentrated in predictable locations where we could control access. Paradise. From their perspective, an entire planet optimized for Antarctic corporate profit models, and then they made sure it happened. I found the communications in the archives when I was 41 years old. My clearance had just been upgraded to board level 7 after I successfully generated a hurricane system that devastated coastal settlements in what used to be Florida, killing an estimated 20,000 people and rendering the region uninhabitable for decades. They celebrated my success with a promotion ceremony, speeches about my dedication to the Antarctic mission, a bonus that doubled my already generous salary, and access to files I'd never been cleared for before. That's when I started reading. That's when everything changed. That's when I stopped being Dr. Elena Vasquez, loyal Antarctic climatologist, and started becoming Samuel Winters, defector and traitor. The board didn't launch the missiles themselves on October 23, 2077. They were too smart for that. Too careful, too aware that history might judge them if direct evidence existed. What they did was spend decades making sure both sides were paranoid enough, desperate enough, and reckless enough to do it for them. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. The files detailed everything: market manipulation schemes that artificially inflated resource scarcity, making nations more desperate and aggressive. Financial backing for weapons manufacturers on both sides of the Sino-American War. Intelligence leaks, carefully crafted to make the Chinese think America was planning a first strike. Anonymous communications that made America think the Chinese were about to launch. Targeted assassinations of diplomats who were making genuine progress on peace talks. Funding for extremist political factions that advocated for military solutions over diplomatic ones. One file particularly haunted me. It was a psychological profile of the American president at the time, analyzing his decision-making patterns, his fears, his psychological triggers. The board had commissioned it from their behavioral analysis department. The conclusion was clinical and terrifying. If presented with evidence of an imminent Chinese first strike, there was an 87% probability the president would order retaliation before seeking verification. The board made sure he saw that evidence. They fabricated it themselves. I found casualty projections buried in encrypted files that took me 3 weeks to access, even with my level 7 clearance. The board's actuarial department had run the numbers with the kind of cold precision you'd apply to calculating insurance premiums. 7.2 billion dead in the initial exchange and immediate aftermath. Another 1.3 billion dead within 6 months from starvation, disease, and radiation exposure. The graphs were color-coded: red for immediate casualties, orange for deaths within 1 month, yellow for deaths within 6 months. They looked like weather maps, beautiful in a horrifying way. The board approved it with a vote of 9-3 on August 15, 2076. The meeting minutes were brief: 23 pages of technical discussion about optimal detonation patterns for maximum atmospheric dust dispersal, estimated nuclear winter duration, projected cooling effects on global temperature, resource accessibility projections for the first 50 years post-war, and then, on page 23, a simple vote tally: 9 in favor of proceeding with the operation, 3 opposed. They called it acceptable market correction in the official documentation, corporate speak for the end of civilization. They had graphs showing projected Antarctic economic growth over the next 5 centuries, pie charts dividing up surface resources among the 12 board families, cost-benefit analyses demonstrating that triggering nuclear war was more profitable than trying to compete in a functional global economy. The dissenters on the board, the 3 who voted against triggering the war, they're not around anymore. Not the way they used to be. Official records say they retired to private estates in the deeper ice layers, enjoying well-earned rest after decades of service. I found different records in the medical database, files describing experimental neural restructuring, procedures, personality modification protocols, memory editing techniques that could rewrite a person's fundamental beliefs and values. One of them was Director Sarah Chen, my great-aunt, though I didn't know that until I read her file. She'd voted against the war, argued passionately in the meeting minutes that genocide was wrong regardless of profit projections, that the board had a moral obligation to prevent the war rather than cause it. 2 months after her dissent, she underwent routine medical evaluation. She never came out the same. Now, she serves on the board still, 300 years old thanks to telomerase therapy, voting exactly how the majority wants her to vote. Always has, according to current records. The old dissenting votes have been erased from official histories. Only the medical files remain, buried in encrypted archives that I was never supposed to access. For 200 years, we've been waiting beneath the ice, while the surface killed itself over scraps we deliberately left them. Every faction war in the Wasteland, every resource conflict, every territorial dispute, all of it foreseeable, all of it foreseen. There are contingency files in Dome 1, stored in the Strategic Planning Vault, that predicted the rise of military organizations like the Brotherhood of Steel. They knew that scattered military remnants would eventually coalesce around technology and discipline. They predicted the formation of post-war governments, like the new California Republic. They understood that humans would try to rebuild, that civilization was a persistent instinct that wouldn't die even after nuclear holocaust. They even predicted the Institute's development. A file dated 2088, just 11 years after the bombs fell, projected that surviving pre-war scientists in the Boston area would eventually retreat underground and continue their research. The board's analysts calculated an 82% probability of an underground scientific community emerging within 50 years. They were off by about a decade, but otherwise accurate. The file recommended monitoring but not interference. Let them develop their technology, the board decided. It might be useful when Operation Hostile Takeover begins. The board has been tracking surface civilization's evolution, like scientists watching bacteria grow in a petri dish. They have files on every major faction, every significant settlement, every person of influence. I saw intelligence reports on Elder Maxon, analyzing his leadership style and military capabilities. Reports on Father Sean and the Institute's synth program. Reports on Desdemona and the railroad's operational security. They know everything. Every radio transmission, every trade route, every alliance and rivalry. Our satellite network intercepts all radio communications. Our scout teams on the surface report back regularly. The board knows more about what's happening in the Commonwealth than the people actually living there do. Operation Hostile Takeover is scheduled for 2295, 8 years from the time I'm recording this message. Full emergence from all 12 Citadel domes simultaneously. The board calls it E-Day, Emergence Day. It's been planned for over 2 centuries, refined and optimized through countless simulations and projections. The operation begins with a coordinated global storm system that will devastate any settlement not already under Antarctic control. Our satellites will generate simultaneous weather events across every inhabited region of the planet. Hurricane-force winds in coastal areas, flash freezing in temperate zones, massive radiation storms concentrating fallout in population centers. The models predict 90% casualties among surface populations within 72 hours. The surviving 10% will be too scattered and desperate to mount organized resistance. Then comes Phase 2, Antarctic military forces emerging from the domes and deploying across the surface in hardened transport vehicles built to operate in extreme conditions. Each dome has a standing military force of approximately 50,000 soldiers, genetically enhanced for combat performance, equipped with weapons technology that makes Brotherhood power armor look primitive. They'll secure strategic locations, establish forward operating bases, begin resource extraction operations. Phase 3 involves what the board calls population integration. The surviving surface dwellers will be offered a choice: submit to Antarctic Authority and receive food, shelter, and medical care, or refuse and be classified as enemy combatants subject to termination. The board's projections suggest 95% will submit. Humans are survivors. They'll do what they must to stay alive. I've seen the colonization maps, huge displays covering entire walls in the Strategic Planning Center, showing Earth's surface divided into resource extraction zones. Every arable hectare of surface land already claimed by one board family or another. Every population center designated for integration or clearance. Every resource deposit, from old uranium mines to pre-war military installations, allocated to specific corporate interests. The Commonwealth is designated Zone North Atlantic 12, claimed by the Petrova family, one of the 12 board dynasties. They've already drawn up plans for where they'll build their regional headquarters, probably somewhere near Diamond City for the infrastructure. Every city, every settlement, every farmstead is marked on those maps. Diamond City is flagged for integration, its walls and infrastructure deemed valuable enough to preserve. Good Neighbor is marked for clearance, considered too lawless and unreliable for efficient corporate management. The Brotherhood's Prydwen is designated a high-priority military target to be neutralized in the first 12 hours of operations. The Institute is marked for full assessment and potential partnership, though the board doesn't trust them and has contingency plans for their destruction if they prove non-cooperative. The scout teams have been infiltrating the surface for decades. I trained with some of them in the military academy beneath Dome 4. They're selected as children, usually from families with multiple offspring, so their absence won't be too noticeable. Taken from their parents at age 8 or 9, told they're going to special schools for gifted children. They spend the next 10 years learning everything about surface culture, wasteland survival skills, faction politics, local dialects and accents, how to walk like someone who struggled their whole lives instead of living in perfect comfort, how to hide their Antarctic genetic markers, the slight differences in bone structure and muscle development that come from optimization programs. I watched them practice in training simulations. They'd spend days in artificial environments designed to mimic surface conditions, radiation exposure, contaminated food and water, combat against simulated raiders and creatures. They learned to be perfectly mediocre, to blend in without standing out, to seem unremarkable while gathering intelligence. By the time they deployed to the surface, they were indistinguishable from natural-born wastelanders. Better, in many ways, because they had training and resources that surface dwellers could never access. There are at least 30 Antarctic operatives in the Commonwealth alone, probably more. I lost count before I escaped, and the deployment numbers were above even my clearance level. Some of them might be people you know, people you trust, that friendly trader who always seems to have exactly what you need, who somehow survived traveling through raider territory without a scratch. That settlement guard who showed up one day with impressive skills and integrated seamlessly into your community. That caravan driver who knows routes that shouldn't exist, shortcuts through dangerous territory that keeps them safe. They could be us. They could be Antarctic scouts. They could be reporting everything back to the board right now. The scouts have specific intelligence priorities, military capabilities of major factions, technological capabilities of groups like the Institute and Brotherhood, resource locations, especially fusion cores and advanced weaponry, population centers and their defensive capabilities, trade routes and supply lines, leadership structures and decision-making processes. They're building a complete intelligence picture of surface civilization, finding every weakness, identifying every threat. I trained with a scout named Marcus before he deployed to the Commonwealth in 2078. We were friends, as much as anyone can be friends, in a system designed to minimize personal loyalty in favor of corporate obedience. He was brilliant at mimicking surface behavior, could shift from proper Antarctic diction to rough wasteland slang in seconds. Last I heard, he was operating as a trader somewhere between Diamond City and Bunker Hill. He might still be out there. He might have been in the same room as you. Asterisk, asterisk. Do you think you could identify an infiltrator if one was living in your settlement? What signs would you look for? Share your thoughts in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk. Biological immortality isn't science fiction in the Antarctic citadels. It's standard procedure for anyone important enough. The board families have been using telomerase reconstruction therapy since 2058, one of the major breakthroughs that came from our extensive medical research programs. It works by repairing the telomeres on chromosome ends, the structures that degrade with each cell division and cause aging. The therapy rewinds cellular aging, repairs accumulated DNA damage, and can effectively reset a person's biological age to their mid-20s, no matter how old they actually are chronologically. The treatment is expensive and time-consuming, requiring monthly sessions in specialized medical facilities. But for the board families, cost is irrelevant. They have access to resources that would seem infinite from a surface perspective. Some of those directors have been making policy decisions for over 2 centuries, accumulating experience and power that no surface leader could match. Director Marcus Chen Wei, the current board chair, is the man I fear most. He cast the deciding vote to trigger the Great War back in 2076 when he was just 40 years old, a young rising star in the Petrova family corporate hierarchy. The meeting minutes show his argument was purely economic. The war would create optimal conditions for Antarctic expansion, he said. The humanitarian concerns were irrelevant compared to the strategic opportunity. His vote made the difference between peace and global annihilation. Now he's 311 years old chronologically, though biologically, he appears to be in his 30s thanks to continuous telomerase therapy. Still sharp, still running cost-benefit analyses on human extinction events with the same cold precision he applied 3 centuries ago. He's planning to personally oversee what they're calling the reclamation dividend in 2095. He'll emerge from Dome 1 at the head of an army, ready to claim Earth's surface as his inheritance. I've seen video recordings of his speeches to the board. He talks about the surface populations like they're resources to be managed, assets to be allocated, numbers in a spreadsheet, the reclamation dividend. That's what they call Operation Hostile Takeover internally. Like the Wasteland is a failed investment finally paying out. Like the billions who died in the Great War were just depreciated assets being written off the books. Like the people struggling to survive on the surface are inventory to be counted and cataloged. The term appears in hundreds of documents, always with that same casual corporate language that strips away any humanity. Projected reclamation dividend for Q3, estimated 22,000 labor assets integrated into Antarctic economic system. Resource extraction optimization in reclamation zones 7 through 12, expected to increase productivity by 15% annually. The projections I saw estimated 40 million survivors across North America by 2095. The board's plans are to reduce that population to 5 million through targeted climate events and resource denial over the following decade. The climate events will come first: droughts that destroy crops, unseasonable freezes that kill livestock, radiation storms that make regions temporarily uninhabitable and force populations to relocate into controlled areas. Then resource denial, blocking access to clean water, destroying Brahmin herds, contaminating food supplies, making survival contingent on Antarctic aid, making submission the only logical choice. The remaining 5 million will be integrated into the Antarctic economic system as what the documents call labor assets, not citizens. Not employees, assets, property. They'll work in resource extraction, manufacturing, agriculture. The board has calculated that 5 million properly managed laborers can efficiently exploit North American resources without requiring the logistical overhead of supporting a larger population. It's optimization taken to its horrifying conclusion. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. I escaped in 2087, 9 months ago as I'm recording this. Stole a survey submarine during a routine ice shelf inspection mission. It was stupid and desperate, and I knew I'd probably die in the attempt, but I couldn't stay anymore. Not after understanding what we'd done, what we were still doing, what we planned to do. I couldn't look at those maps anymore, couldn't run those calculations, couldn't optimize storm patterns for maximum casualties while pretending it was just weather management. The submarine theft was almost embarrassingly easy, which makes me think part of me wanted to be caught. I'd been assigned to inspect automated monitoring stations along the ice shelf edge, a routine mission I'd done dozens of times. The submarine was a small 2-person craft, spherical pressure hull with minimal life support, designed for short-range operations in the frigid waters beneath the Antarctic ice. I filed my flight plan for a 3-hour inspection tour. Then, I surfaced the submarine near the Commonwealth coast on a moonless night, sealed the automated systems to dive to maximum depth and implode, destroying any tracking equipment and making it look like a catastrophic mechanical failure instead of numbers defection. I walked inland with nothing but the clothes on my back, a waterproof bag containing my research notes, and enough caps I'd been saving secretly for 20 years to buy passage to the first settlement I found. The cold didn't bother me, my body is made for it, but the humidity, the warmer air, the way everything smelled different from the sterile recycled atmosphere of the domes, that was overwhelming. I walked for 2 days before I found a caravan heading to Diamond City. Paid them triple their usual rate for passage, no questions asked. They thought I was running from the Institute. Let them think it. It's a better cover story than the truth. The ice citadels don't forgive defection, ever. I've seen what happens to operatives who go native, who start sympathizing with surface populations, who begin to question the board's mission. The retrieval teams arrive without warning, usually in the middle of the night when the target is most vulnerable. 3 soldiers in adaptive camouflage armor that uses thermal reactive panels to blend perfectly with any environment, making them nearly invisible even in broad daylight. They carry weapons that fire supercooled crystal shards, essentially weaponized ice that shatters on impact and leaves no ballistic evidence, just what looks like blunt force trauma. The wounds freeze flesh instantly, causing massive tissue damage while leaving minimal blood evidence. I watched retrieval operation recordings during my training. They're shown to all Antarctic citizens above a certain clearance level as deterrents. The defector never sees them coming. One moment they're going about their surface life, pretending to be a wastelander. The next moment, 3 shapes materialize from nothing and they're down, unconscious from tranquilizer darts. The retrieval team bundles them into a transport pod, the kind of advanced vehicle that can achieve low orbit and return to Antarctica within 6 hours. No witnesses, no evidence, just another person who disappeared in the wasteland, which happens so often that nobody questions it. Then comes the tribunal. Public, broadcast on all Citadel information networks as a lesson to anyone else who might be having doubts about the mission. The defector stands in a containment field in the Central Justice Hall of Dome 1 while the board reads the charges. Betrayal of corporate trust, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, abandonment of assigned duties, genetic modification theft, because our enhanced bodies are considered proprietary corporate property. The sentences are always the same: neural restructuring, memory modification, personality adjustment. Everything that made them question the mission gets erased, rewritten, optimized for obedience. The worst part is they're sent back to the surface afterward to continue their mission, this time with fail-safes installed in their neural implants. Tiny devices that monitor thought patterns and trigger pain responses if they start developing unauthorized opinions again. They become perfect operatives, incapable of independent thought, unable to question orders. I knew a scout named Jennifer who went through the process. Before her defection, she was creative and funny, always questioning procedures, suggesting improvements. After retrieval and restructuring, she was flat, empty. She followed orders perfectly but seemed barely alive. They deployed her back to the Commonwealth 6 months later. I wonder if she's still out there, a hollow shell doing the board's work. That's my future if they catch me. The retrieval teams are probably already looking. My submarine implosion might have fooled the initial investigation, but eventually someone in the records department will notice discrepancies. My research notes that should be in my office but aren't. Personal effects missing from my quarters. Financial transactions that don't make sense for someone who died in a mechanical accident. The board employs hundreds of auditors whose entire job is finding these kinds of inconsistencies. Eventually, they'll conclude, I defected. Then the retrieval authorization will be issued. Then they'll come. I've tried to warn people about what's coming. The Minutemen seemed like the obvious choice, a military organization dedicated to protecting settlements, fighting for ordinary people. I approached Preston Garvey in Sanctuary Hills 3 months after arriving in the Commonwealth. Found him coordinating construction efforts, helping settlers build better defenses. He seemed like a good man, genuinely committed to helping people. I asked for a private conversation. He agreed, probably thinking I had intelligence about raiders or super mutants. I told him everything. About Antarctica, about the board, about Operation Hostile Takeover, about the scout teams. I showed him my research notes, technical specifications for the satellite network, maps I'd copied from the strategic planning, archives. I explained the weather manipulation, the planned invasion, the timeline. He listened with the patient expression of someone humoring a crazy person, nodding occasionally, asking a few polite questions. When I finished, he thanked me for the information and said the Minutemen would keep it in mind. Said they appreciated citizens bringing potential threats to their attention. Said someone would follow up if they needed more information. Nobody ever followed up. I went back to Sanctuary 2 weeks later. Preston was polite, but distant. Said they'd evaluated my information and determined it wasn't an immediate threat requiring Minutemen resources. Said they had more pressing concerns with raiders and super mutants. Said if I had evidence of actual Antarctic military activity in the Commonwealth, they'd be happy to investigate. But satellite networks and invasion plans scheduled for 8 years in the future? That wasn't something they could act on. I understood. From his perspective, I was just another Wasteland crazy with an elaborate conspiracy theory. The railroad was more receptive, at least initially. I made contact through the usual channels, the Freedom Trail markers that anyone paying attention can follow. Left messages in dead drops. Eventually got a summons to a meeting in a safe house near Bunker Hill. Desdemona met me there personally, which I later learned was unusual. Usually, you talk to intermediaries for weeks before meeting leadership, but something about my message intrigued her. She listened for 2 hours, took notes, asked pointed questions about Antarctic technology and infiltration methods. She was particularly interested in the scout training programs, the psychological conditioning techniques we used, the ways we taught operatives to maintain cover identities for years. I could see her making connections to her own work with synths and institute infiltration. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, she thanked me for the information and said the railroad would investigate, but she was honest about their limitations. They had more immediate concerns with the Institute, synths being hunted and killed every day. Railroad agents disappearing into Institute laboratories. A war they were barely surviving against an enemy with nearly unlimited resources. They couldn't spare resources chasing what might be rumors about an Antarctic threat that wouldn't materialize for almost a decade. If the board's invasion actually started, if Antarctic forces appeared in the Commonwealth, then they'd fight. But until then, the Institute was the existential threat that required all their attention. I gave her copies of my research notes. She promised to keep them in the archives to brief future railroad leadership about the potential threat. It was better than nothing. At least someone would have the information if I disappeared or died before Operation Hostile Takeover began. The Brotherhood of Steel was the hardest sell. They have the military capability to potentially fight the Antarctic forces, the technological sophistication to understand the threat, and the institutional structure to coordinate a defense. If anyone could stop Operation Hostile Takeover, it would be them. So I knew I needed to convince them, and I knew it would be nearly impossible. Getting an audience with Elder Maxon required patience and persistence. I started by talking to lower-ranking Brotherhood members, establishing credibility, proving I had genuine technical knowledge. I helped a scribe, named Halen, repair some equipment using techniques she'd never seen before. I provided intelligence about a super mutant stronghold that turned out to be accurate. I donated salvage and supplies. Slowly, over months, I built a reputation as a useful ally. Finally, I got my meeting aboard the Prydwen. Elder Maxon granted me 30 minutes in his quarters. I came prepared with documentation, technical specifications, strategic analyses. I laid out everything, the satellite network and how it worked, the weather manipulation and the evidence in extreme climate patterns across the wasteland, Operation Hostile Takeover and the detailed invasion plans, the scout teams and how to identify them, the board's objectives and timeline. Maxon listened in silence, face unreadable behind that thick beard. He let me talk for the full 30 minutes without interruption. I thought maybe I was getting through to him. Maybe the Brotherhood would take the threat seriously. Maybe they'd start preparing defenses, developing countermeasures, coordinating with other factions. When I finished, he asked one question. Did I have proof? Physical evidence beyond my testimony? Technical specifications that could be verified? Anything concrete that demonstrated Antarctic capabilities? I admitted I didn't. Everything was in the Citadel computer systems, encrypted with quantum protocols that couldn't be accessed remotely. My research notes were based on memory and partial data I'd copied before escaping. The satellite network was real and operational, but proving it was controlled from Antarctica rather than being automated remnants from before the war, I couldn't do that from the surface. Maxon thanked me for my time. Said the Brotherhood appreciated citizens bringing potential threats to their attention. Said if I obtained verifiable evidence of Antarctic military capabilities, they would absolutely investigate further. But without proof, they couldn't divert resources based on one person's claims about a secret civilization in Antarctica planning an invasion almost a decade away. He had a scribe escort me off the airship, polite, professional, completely unconvinced. I understood his skepticism. From a Brotherhood perspective, my story sounded insane. Antarctica? A secret corporate civilization that survived the Great War? Weather control satellites? Genetically enhanced? Soldiers? Invasion plans targeting the entire surface world? It sounded like the paranoid ravings of someone who'd inhaled too many radiation fumes. Without physical evidence, without verifiable proof, why would anyone believe it? But here's what keeps me awake at night. The Brotherhood has verifiable evidence of the Institute's capabilities because they fought Institute synths, captured Institute technology, interrogated people who've been inside. They believe in the Institute because they can see it, touch it, fight it. The Antarctic threat is invisible until it's too late. By the time there's verifiable evidence of Antarctic military capability on the surface, Operation Hostile Takeover will have already begun. The defense preparations that might make a difference need to start now, not when the invasion forces are emerging from the ice. No one believes that Antarctica is inhabited, let alone that it's the most powerful nation on Earth. How could they? The pre-war world barely acknowledged the continent existed beyond scientific research stations. Old world maps show Antarctica as a blank white space, maybe a few research outpost markers, nothing suggesting permanent civilization. The idea that corporations built a secret underground empire beneath the ice while the world was ending sounds like a conspiracy theory. It sounds like the kind of story raiders tell around campfires to scare each other. It sounds completely insane, and I sound insane when I tell it. I know I do. The crazy trader in the heavy coat who won't shut up about Antarctica. The paranoid scavenger who thinks weather is controlled by satellites nobody can see. The delusional wastelander who believes a secret civilization is planning to invade in 8 years. I've heard the whispers in Diamond City. I've seen the looks in Good Neighbor. People tolerate me because I pay well for maps and documents, but they think I'm crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe 43 years of indoctrination and genetic conditioning broke something in my brain. Maybe the stress of defection triggered some kind of paranoid psychosis. Maybe I'm remembering things that never happened, constructing elaborate fantasies to cope with the trauma of whatever really happened to me. I've considered all of this. Spent long nights wondering if my memories of Dome 7 and Project Long Winter and the board of directors are even real. Then the temperature drops 20 degrees overnight and settlements freeze. Then an unseasonable radiation storm rolls across the Commonwealth, killing crops and irradiating water supplies. Then I see weather patterns that match the algorithms I designed, following trajectories that shouldn't be possible naturally. And I know I'm not crazy. I know it's real. I know they're still out there, still manipulating the climate, still preparing for Operation Hostile Takeover. Every night, I scan the sky for our satellites. You can see them if you know where to look and when to look. They're not like stars, which twinkle because of atmospheric interference. They're not like shooting stars, which streak across the sky briefly. They're steady points of light that move in perfect mathematical patterns, crossing the sky at precise intervals. Most people don't notice them because they don't know what they're looking for. They see a moving light and assume it's a pre-war satellite or space debris or something else mundane. But I know the orbital patterns. I designed some of them. I can identify individual satellites by their trajectories. Platform 7 Alpha crosses the Commonwealth sky every 93 minutes, following a polar orbit that takes it from north to south. Platform 12 Beta has a more complex path, looping in a figure-8 pattern that covers both hemispheres. I watch them track across the night sky, and I know they're watching back. Thermal sensors detecting heat signatures from settlements. Radiation detectors measuring fallout distribution. Communication intercepts pulling every radio transmission out of the air. All that data flowing back to Dome 1, feeding into the strategic planning computers, updating the invasion models. The satellites know where every major settlement is located. They know Diamond City's population within a margin of error of about 50 people. They know the Brotherhood's Pridwin follows predictable patrol routes. They know Good Neighbor's defensive capabilities down to how many guards patrol at night. They've been gathering this intelligence for 2 centuries, building the most comprehensive understanding of surface civilization that exists anywhere. Asterisk, asterisk. When you look up at the night sky, do you think about what might be watching you back? About what technology might still be functioning up there, gathering data, reporting to someone? Share what you think in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk. My genetic modifications are killing me. Every day is harder than the last. Antarcticans aren't just adapted for extreme cold through natural evolution. We're genetically engineered from birth. Modified blood chemistry that prevents ice crystal formation in tissues even at sub-zero temperatures. Enhanced metabolic processes that generate more body heat with less fuel. Cardiovascular systems optimized for functioning in low temperature, low oxygen environments. Organ structures redesigned for efficiency in cold conditions. In Antarctica, these modifications made me superior. I could work in conditions that would kill baseline humans in minutes. I could think clearly at temperatures where normal brain function would shut down. I could survive on fewer calories and less oxygen than surface humans require. I was optimized for the environment I lived in. But in the Commonwealth heat, these same modifications are malfunctions. My blood chemistry, designed to prevent freezing, is now causing clotting problems because it's never cold enough to trigger normal regulatory responses. My enhanced metabolism generates too much heat for the environment, causing persistent low-grade fever and organ stress. My cardiovascular system tries to regulate temperature through vasodilation it wasn't designed to perform, putting strain on my heart. My kidneys are struggling to process waste products at these temperatures. My liver is showing signs of thermal stress damage from trying to function outside its optimized range. I found a doctor in Diamond City named Sunday. She's good, competent, probably the best medical care available in the Commonwealth outside the Institute. I paid her well to run a comprehensive blood panel and physical examination. She spent 3 hours reviewing the results with a puzzled expression, comparing my readings to what she knew about normal human physiology. Finally, she asked me what kind of radiation exposure I'd experienced. My blood work showed abnormalities she'd never seen before. Cellular structures that didn't match any known mutation pattern. Protein markers that suggested genetic modification, but with techniques she didn't recognize. I told her I didn't know, which was technically true. I don't know all the specific modifications done to me as an embryo. The genetic engineering programs in Antarctica are proprietary corporate secrets. She prescribed Radaway and told me to come back if symptoms worsened. I didn't tell her the Radaway wouldn't help because my problems aren't radiation damage. They're incompatibility between my engineered biology and the environment I'm trying to survive in. Like running a machine designed for one set of conditions in a completely different environment. Eventually, something critical fails. The symptoms are worsening. I have maybe 2 years left, 3 if I'm lucky, and can find ways to manage the organ damage. Sometimes I think about trying to get colder, moving north to areas with harsher climate. But even the coldest Commonwealth winter isn't cold enough for my biology. I'd need Arctic conditions, sustained sub-zero temperatures, The kind of environment that doesn't exist on the surface anymore, except maybe at the poles. The Institute supposedly has advanced medical technology, cutting-edge genetic engineering, and cybernetic augmentation. Maybe they could help. Maybe they could reverse some of my modifications, or provide artificial organs that would function better in surface conditions. But approaching them feels like jumping from one corporate dystopia to another. And what if the board has operatives in the Institute? What if I walk into their medical labs and there's an Antarctic scout working as a researcher who recognizes my genetic markers? I'd be captured, retrieved, restructured. Everything I've tried to accomplish would be erased. So I take my rat away that doesn't help, and I trade my salvage, and I try to prepare people for what's coming, even though nobody believes me. And I scan the sky every night, watching the satellites track across the darkness, knowing that, somewhere beneath the Antarctic ice, the board is watching those same data feeds and counting down to E-Day. So when the temperature drops 20 degrees in a single day, when storms come out of nowhere with wind patterns that shouldn't be meteorologically possible, when fog rolls in and doesn't leave for weeks even though weather systems should be more dynamic, that's not natural weather. That's my old colleagues in Project Long Winter running test sequences. That's the satellite network executing atmospheric manipulation protocols. That's a test run for Operation Hostile Takeover, and the real thing will be 1,000 times worse. The invasion will begin with simultaneous weather events across every inhabited region. I've seen the simulation models. They're terrifyingly precise. Hurricane force winds generated by creating massive pressure differentials between adjacent air masses. Flash freezing caused by redirecting polar air masses toward temperate zones at velocities that overwhelm normal atmospheric mixing. Radiation storms concentrating fallout from the upper atmosphere into specific target areas through electromagnetic manipulation. The Commonwealth will see all of it. Sustained winds exceeding 100 miles per hour that will tear apart anything not built into bedrock. Temperature drops of 50 degrees in 6 hours, freezing anyone caught outside without proper shelter. Radiation levels spiking to lethal doses in minutes as 2 centuries of accumulated atmospheric fallout gets concentrated and weaponized. The models predict 90% casualties among surface populations within the first 72 hours, not from direct action, from weather. After the storms comes Phase 2. Antarctic military forces emerging from transport tunnels that connect the ice citadels to strategic locations worldwide. Yes, the tunnels exist. They've been under construction for 200 years, massive borehole operations that carved passages through Earth's crust from Antarctica to North America, Europe, Asia. The board started building them 5 years after the Great War, once they were certain the surface wouldn't recover quickly enough to detect the seismic disturbances. The Commonwealth tunnel exit is somewhere in the glowing sea. I never had clearance for exact coordinates, but strategic planning documents reference target zone designations in that region. Makes sense strategically. The glowing sea's radiation levels deter surface exploration. Nobody's mapping that territory carefully enough to notice a tunnel entrance. When E-Day comes, Antarctic forces will emerge there, already inside Commonwealth borders, ready to begin operations. Each dome contributes approximately 50,000 soldiers to the invasion force. That's 600,000 total. A standing army that's been training for 2 centuries, specifically for surface operations. They're not just genetically enhanced, they're equipped with technology the fond surface can't match. Powered armor that makes Brotherhood suits look primitive, built from metamaterials that adapt to environmental conditions. Weapons that can kill from kilometers away with perfect accuracy. Vehicles that operate on ground, water, and air with equal efficiency. Communication systems that can coordinate operations across continental distances without being intercepted. And they've been preparing for this specific mission their entire lives. Every Antarctic soldier knows exactly what they're supposed to do on E-Day, which settlements to secure first, which infrastructure to preserve, which resistance elements to eliminate. They've run thousands of simulations using real-time intelligence data from the Scout network. They know the Commonwealth better than most people who live here. They know Diamond City's defensive weak points. They know the Pridwen's weapon capabilities and how to disable them. They know every Minuteman settlement location and supply cache. The invasion will be perfectly executed because it's been perfectly prepared. Then comes Phase 3, population integration. The survivors will face a choice that's not really a choice. Submit to Antarctic Authority and receive food, shelter, medical care, or refuse and be classified as enemy combatants, subject to immediate termination. The board's psychological projections suggest 95% will submit within the first week. Humans are survivors. When facing death from starvation or death from resistance, most choose submission. The integration process is detailed in documents I wish I'd never read: psychological evaluation to determine optimal assignment, physical examination to catalog useful genetic material, skill assessment to identify profitable labor applications, then assignment to work details, resource extraction in the glowing sea, harvesting uranium and other useful materials, manufacturing in converted settlements producing goods for Antarctic consumption, agriculture in controlled farms, growing food for export back to the citadels, all of it optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum cost. The integrated population will live in supervised barracks in designated settlement zones. They'll receive food rations calculated to maintain work capacity without excess. They'll have access to basic medical care for treatable conditions that affect productivity. They'll be monitored constantly through implanted tracking devices that also deliver pain stimuli if they resist or underperform. It's not slavery because the board doesn't use that word. It's contract labor with indefinite terms and limited rights, completely legal under Antarctic corporate law. Find me in Diamond City or Good Neighbor. I'm the trader who never takes off his coat, even in summer when everyone else is sweating in light clothes. The one who pays double for any pre-war Antarctic maps or corporate records, anything that might help me understand the board's operations better or find weaknesses in their plans. The one who flinches when the temperature drops suddenly because I know what it means. The one who watches the sky more than the ground, tracking satellites instead of threats. I'll tell you everything I know about how to fight the ice, about where the satellite control nodes might be vulnerable, though attacking them would require capabilities the surface doesn't have, about what frequencies the scout teams use for communication, though they probably use quantum encryption that can't be intercepted with current Commonwealth technology, about the Citadel locations and their defensive capabilities, though assaulting them would require forces that don't exist. Honestly, I don't know if the surface can win. The board has every advantage. Superior technology, superior numbers, superior intelligence, 2 centuries of preparation versus a surface that doesn't even believe the threat exists. It's not a fair fight. It was never meant to be a fair fight. The board designed Operation Hostile Takeover to be an unwinnable scenario for surface populations. But I know people in the Wasteland can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together. I've seen it in the months I've been here. The Minutemen protecting settlements against overwhelming raider forces. The Railroad fighting impossible odds against Institute synth armies. The Brotherhood's coordinated military operations. Even the raiders and gunners have survival instincts and tactical capabilities that Antarctic soldiers, for all their training, have never really tested in genuine combat. The board's people have been practicing against simulations. You've been surviving against real threats every day of your lives. But you need to know what's coming. You need to prepare, even if it seems hopeless, because in less than 8 years, the ice is coming for all of you. And I might be the only one who knows enough about Antarctic operations to give you any chance of survival. Let me tell you what I've learned about fighting an enemy that controls the weather itself. It starts with understanding that everything you think you know about defensive strategy is obsolete. Walls don't matter when storms can generate winds strong enough to tear stone apart. Fortified positions don't matter when temperatures can drop fast enough to kill everyone inside through hypothermia. Military strength doesn't matter when your enemy can coordinate global operations from orbital platforms you can't reach. The only advantage the surface has is one the board doesn't fully understand because they've never experienced it. Desperation, real, genuine desperation, born from 2 centuries of struggling to survive in a radioactive hellscape. Antarctic soldiers train in simulations. Surface dwellers live in reality. There's a difference between practicing survival and actually surviving. The board's people have never faced real hunger, real radiation sickness, real resource scarcity. They've studied it academically. You've lived it. I've been mapping potential resistance strategies for months, ever since I arrived in the Commonwealth. Most of them are long shots that probably won't work, but they're better than nothing. Better than waiting helplessly for E-Day to arrive. First, the satellite network needs to be disrupted, not destroyed, because you can't reach orbital platforms with surface weapons, but disrupted. The satellites communicate with ground control in Dome 1 through quantum encrypted channels, but they also have backup autonomous operations protocols for contingencies. If you can generate enough electromagnetic interference at the right frequencies, you might trigger their autonomous mode, which defaults to minimal operations instead of active weather manipulation. I don't know exactly what frequencies would work. My clearance never extended to satellite engineering specifications, but someone with technical expertise, maybe Institute, scientists, or Brotherhood scribes, might be able to calculate the parameters. The problem is, generating that much interference requires power sources the Commonwealth doesn't have. You'd need multiple high-yield fusion reactors operating in synchronized pulses, creating electromagnetic waves strong enough to reach orbital altitude without dispersing. The Institute might have that capability. Maybe, if they were willing to help, which brings us back to the fundamental problem that nobody believes the threat exists. Second, the Scout network needs to be identified and neutralized. This is theoretically possible with current Commonwealth capabilities, but incredibly difficult. Antarctic scouts are trained to be perfect wastelanders. They know how to act desperate, how to seem traumatized by the wasteland's horrors, how to integrate into communities without raising suspicion. But they have tells if you know what to look for. Their medical knowledge is too good. They can treat injuries with techniques that shouldn't exist in the wasteland. Not institute-level technology, but better field medicine than anyone else has access to. If someone consistently knows exactly how to treat radiation poisoning, how to set broken bones perfectly, how to diagnose diseases correctly every time, that's suspicious. Surface medicine is trial and error, folk remedies, and educated guesses. Antarctic scouts have 2 centuries of advanced medical training. Their navigation is too precise. They know routes through dangerous territory that work too consistently. Raiders and supermutants don't attack them as often as they should, statistically. That's because scouts have access to real-time intelligence from the satellite network. They know where threats are located and can route around them. If a traitor consistently arrives on schedule through territory that should be unpredictable, that's worth investigating. Their reactions to technology are wrong. When a scout sees pre-war technology, they recognize it immediately because they've studied it extensively. But surface dwellers usually need a moment to figure out what they're looking at, especially with more obscure devices. If someone instantly identifies a piece of equipment and knows how it works without having encountered it before, that's a red flag. Their stories have too much detail in some areas and not enough in others. Scouts are taught to memorize comprehensive cover identities, but those identities are constructed from intelligence reports, not lived experience. They'll know facts about places they claim to be from, but they won't have the emotional connections and random memories that come from actually living somewhere. If someone can recite their settlement's history perfectly, but can't remember what their childhood home smelled like, that's suspicious. Most importantly, they're too calm. Surface dwellers have trauma. Everyone does. 2 centuries of struggling to survive leave psychological scars. But Antarctic scouts are raised in perfect comfort and then given psychological conditioning to handle stress. They can fake fear and anger and desperation, but their baseline emotional state is too stable. If someone never seems genuinely rattled by the wasteland's horrors, if they're always composed and rational even in crisis situations, they might be a scout. The railroad would be best positioned to identify infiltrators, since they already do similar work identifying Institute synths. If I could convince Desdemona to take the Antarctic threat seriously, the railroad could potentially sweep the Commonwealth for scouts. But without proof, without verification, they're not going to divert resources from their existing mission. Third, the Commonwealth tunnel exit in the glowing sea needs to be found and fortified. If Antarctic forces are going to emerge from underground, that's where they'll come from. Finding it will be nearly impossible because the glowing sea is vast and the radiation makes systematic exploration difficult. But if someone could locate the tunnel entrance before E-Day, it could be collapsed or at least heavily defended. Force the Antarctic Army to find another entry point, buy time for evacuations and defensive preparations. The Institute might have mapping data for the glowing sea that could help narrow the search. They've certainly explored that region more thoroughly than anyone else, but again, that requires convincing them to help, which requires convincing them the threat is real, which brings us back to the fundamental credibility problem. Fourth, underground shelters need to be built that can withstand the initial weather assault. Not the vaults, which are too obvious and already mapped by Antarctic intelligence. New shelters, hidden ones, built in locations the satellites can't easily detect. Deep underground, possibly in old subway tunnels or natural cave systems, stocked with supplies for extended habitation, equipped with air, filtration that can handle radiation storms, connected to hidden surface access points for eventual emergence. This is actually feasible with current Commonwealth capabilities. The Minutemen could coordinate construction. Diamond City has the manufacturing capacity to produce necessary materials. Goodneighbor has the engineering expertise to design proper shelters. The problem is scale. You'd need shelters for tens of thousands of people across the entire Commonwealth. That kind of construction would take years and massive resource investment, and it needs to start now, not when the invasion begins. Fifth, an alliance needs to be formed between all major Commonwealth factions: the Brotherhood, the Minutemen, the Railroad, even the Institute if possible. Each faction has capabilities the others lack. The Brotherhood has military strength and power armor. The Minutemen have widespread settlement networks and local knowledge. The Railroad has intelligence operations and infiltration expertise. The Institute has advanced technology and scientific capabilities. Together, coordinated properly, they might stand a chance. Divided, they'll be eliminated piecemeal. But Commonwealth factions hate each other. The Brotherhood views the Institute as abomination. The Institute views everyone else as primitives. The Railroad exists specifically to fight the Institute. The Minutemen are too weak to force cooperation. Getting them to work together against a threat most don't believe exists seems impossible. Maybe if Antarctic forces actually appeared, if the invasion actually started, survival instinct would force cooperation, but by then it might be too late. Asterisk, asterisk. Imagine you're leading a faction and someone told you about this Antarctic threat. Would you risk your resources preparing for something that might not happen, or would you focus on immediate threats? What would you do? Asterisk, asterisk. I've tried to plant seeds for all of this. Conversations with traders about building deeper shelters. suggestions to Minutemen officers about forming broader alliances, technical information shared with Brotherhood scribes about potential electromagnetic warfare applications, intelligence reports left in railroad dead drops about infiltrator identification techniques. Most of it gets ignored or dismissed, but maybe someone will remember when the storms start. Maybe someone will put the pieces together when the temperature drops 50 degrees overnight. Maybe my warnings will seem less crazy when Antarctic soldiers start emerging from the glowing sea. The guilt keeps me awake most nights. I designed those weather systems. I optimized those storm patterns. I calculated how to maximize suffering and minimize survival. Every settlement that froze, every crop that died, every person who starved because unseasonable frost killed their Brahmin, that was me. I did that. I told myself it was just mathematics, just algorithms, just weather management. I told myself the surface. Populations were genetic inferiors who'd failed the market test. I believed the board's propaganda because believing it was easier than confronting what I was really doing. I was 41 years old before I understood I was helping commit genocide. That's 41 years of complicity, 41 years of optimization and refinement and improved efficiency in killing people I'd never met. 41 years of being a good corporate citizen doing her job without asking uncomfortable questions. The board didn't force me to work on Project Long Winter. I volunteered, I competed for the position, I was proud when I got it. There's no redemption for that. No amount of warning the surface populations changes what I've already done. But maybe I can prevent what's coming. Maybe 8 years is enough time to prepare a defense if I can convince the right people to listen. Maybe the information I'm sharing will save some lives when E-Day arrives. It's not redemption. It's just the only thing I can do with the time I have left. My body is failing faster now. The organ damage is accelerating. Sun tells me my kidney function is down to 60%. My liver enzymes are elevated to levels that would be fatal in baseline humans. My heart is showing arrhythmias that suggest structural damage. She asked me again what kind of radiation exposure I experienced because these symptoms don't match any known Wasteland syndrome. I told her I didn't know, which is still technically true, and she prescribed more Radaway that won't help. I've started coughing blood in the mornings. My hands shake worse than they used to, not just from cold now, but from nerve damage. I can feel my body shutting down system by system, optimized organs failing to adapt to conditions they were never designed for. Maybe 18 months left now, maybe less. The timeline is getting tighter, while my window to make a difference gets smaller. Sometimes I think about going back, just walking into the glowing sea, finding the tunnel entrance if I can, going home to Dome 7, submitting to neural restructuring, letting them erase the guilt and the doubt and the memories of what I've learned. Going back to being Dr. Elena Vasquez, loyal climatologist, good corporate citizen. My body would recover in the cold. The organ damage would heal with proper medical treatment. I could live another 200 years in comfort and security. But then I'd be complicit again. I'd be helping them finish what we started. I'd watch the invasion preparations knowing what they meant for surface populations and not caring because they'd erased my capacity to care. That's worse than dying. That's worse than anything. So I stay in the Commonwealth, and I cough blood, and I try to warn people who think I'm crazy. The board is monitoring communications. I'm certain of it. The satellite network intercepts all radio transmissions. Every time Preston Garvey calls for Minutemen assistance on the radio, the board knows. Every time the Brotherhood broadcasts on military frequency, the board records it. Every time Diamond City Radio plays a song, the board catalogs it. They're building psychological profiles of surface populations, understanding how people think and communicate, identifying leaders and influencers who might organize resistance. That's why I'm recording this message instead of broadcasting it. Physical media is harder to intercept than radio signals. If you're hearing this, it means someone found my recordings after I died, or I successfully distributed them through hand-to-hand trading networks that the satellites can't monitor as easily. It means the information might have survived even if I didn't. I've hidden copies in multiple locations across the Commonwealth. One set buried near Sanctuary Hills in a sealed container. One set in a safe house I rented in Good Neighbor under a false name. One set deposited in a bank in Diamond City with instructions to open it if I don't. Check in for 6 months. One set given to a caravan trader I trust with instructions to spread copies across all settlements. If even one set survives and gets distributed, the warnings will reach people. The board's timeline is accelerating. I've noticed it in the weather patterns over the last month. More frequent test runs, more aggressive parameter adjustments. Storms that match invasion scenario profiles from the simulation models I remember. They're not scheduled to start Operation Hostile Takeover for 8 more years, but they're ramping up preliminary operations sooner than the original plans indicated. Maybe they've detected my defection and are worried about intelligence leaks. Maybe they're just ahead of schedule and eager to begin. Either way, it suggests E-Day might come sooner than 2095. If the invasion starts early, if Antarctic forces emerge before the Commonwealth has time to prepare even minimally, the casualties will be even worse than projected. The board calculated 90% surface casualties based on 8 years of continued weather manipulation, weakening settlements and populations. If they start now with populations at current strength, initial casualties might be lower, but organized resistance might be stronger. It's a strategic trade-off the board is probably analyzing right now. I need to try harder to make people listen. More aggressive warnings. More public demonstrations. Maybe if I could somehow prove weather manipulation is happening, show people the mathematical impossibility of certain storm patterns occurring naturally, they'd start believing. The Brotherhood has meteorological equipment. Maybe I could borrow it, record data, show them the evidence in the numbers. Or maybe I'm just getting desperate as my time runs out and I'm not thinking clearly anymore. Maybe the organ damage is affecting my cognition. Maybe I'm spiraling into paranoia and seeing patterns that aren't there. It's getting harder to tell the difference between legitimate threat assessment and delusional thinking. The board trained us well. Even after defection, even after understanding the truth, part of me still wants to believe the propaganda. Part of me still thinks maybe the surface populations really are inferior and Antarctic rule would be better for everyone. That's the insidious thing about indoctrination. It doesn't disappear just because you consciously reject it. It lives in your subconscious, influencing your thoughts in ways you don't recognize. I catch myself thinking in board terminology sometimes, referring to people as assets, calculating human lives in cost-benefit frameworks, viewing settlements as resource extraction opportunities. Then I realize what I'm doing, and I'm horrified, but the thoughts keep coming because they're embedded too deeply to fully root out. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. Maybe that's why. The board doesn't worry too much about defectors. Even if we escape, even if we try to warn people, we're still shaped by 40 years of conditioning. We still think like them in fundamental ways. We're not really free. We're just broken tools that stopped functioning properly. The board probably factors a certain defection rate into their planning models, accepts it as expected wastage, knows that defectors rarely accomplish anything meaningful before they die or get retrieved. But I have to try, even if it's futile, even if nobody believes me, even if my warnings get filed away as the ravings of a wasteland, crazy and forgotten until it's too late. I have to try because the alternative is accepting that I spent 41 years helping plan genocide and then did nothing to stop it when I finally understood what I was doing. The satellites are crossing overhead right now as I record this. Platform 7 Alpha on its 93-minute polar orbit. I can see it through the window, a steady point of light moving south to north. It's watching Diamond City right now. Thermal sensors cataloging heat signatures from every building. Communication intercepts pulling in every conversation happening on radio frequencies. It knows I'm here. It knows I'm recording. The board is probably reviewing the data right now, running analysis on my behavior patterns, updating their psychological profile. They'll come for me eventually. The retrieval team will materialize from nowhere, and I'll be unconscious before I can react. Neural restructuring, memory modification, personality adjustment, back to Antarctica, back to being Dr. Elena Vasquez, back to optimizing weather systems for maximum surface casualties. Unless my organ damage kills me first, which might be a mercy. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of being erased. Of everything I've learned and tried to share being wiped away, leaving just an empty shell doing the board's work. That's the real death. Physical death is just organs failing. Cognitive death is personality and memory and identity being destroyed while your body keeps functioning. That's what the board does to defectors. That's what they'll do to me if they catch me. So I keep trading, keep warning, keep watching the satellites, keep preparing for an invasion most people don't believe is coming. Keep trying to identify scouts in the population. Keep mapping potential defensive positions. Keep analyzing weather patterns for evidence of manipulation. Keep recording these confessions and hiding copies across the Commonwealth. Keep doing what I can with the time I have left. The wasteland is beautiful sometimes. I never expected that. The board taught us to view it as failure, as evidence of surface inferiority, as terrain to be conquered and exploited. But there's beauty in how people here survive, in how they build communities in impossible conditions, in how they maintain hope despite everything, in how they help each other even when helping endangers themselves. Diamond City should be impossible. A city built in a pre-war baseball stadium, protected by walls that raiders should be able to breach, sustained by trade routes that should fail constantly. But it works because people make it work. They coordinate, they cooperate, they sacrifice for collective benefit. The board would call that inefficient altruism. They'd calculate the lost productivity from helping others instead of maximizing individual gain. They'd view it as evolutionary weakness, but it's actually strength. The Commonwealth survives because people work together. Antarctic citadels survive because the board controls everything through force and conditioning. When Operation Hostile Takeover begins, that difference might matter. Surface populations have real loyalty born from shared struggle. Antarctic soldiers have manufactured loyalty programmed through psychological conditioning, which is stronger when tested. The board thinks they know. I'm not certain they're right. Good neighbor is even more impossible. A settlement founded by criminals exiled from Diamond City, somehow maintaining order despite being full of people who reject authority. It should collapse into chaos. Raiders should overrun it within weeks. But Hancock keeps it stable through a combination of charisma, calculated violence, and genuine care for his people. The board would never understand how that works because they don't believe leadership can be based on anything except hierarchy and control. The Minutemen are the most impossible of all. A militia that failed, collapsed, was reduced to a single survivor and a handful of refugees, then rebuilt from nothing through pure idealism and commitment to protecting settlements. The board's models predicted the Minutemen would never recover after losing the castle. Organizations don't rebuild from total failure, according to Antarctic organizational theory. Except the Minutemen did, because surface humans are more resilient than the board's models account for. Maybe that's the real weapon against Operation Hostile Takeover, not electromagnetic interference or fortified positions or alliance between factions. Just the fundamental resilience of people who've survived 2 centuries of post-nuclear hell and refuse to give up. The board can manipulate weather and deploy enhanced soldiers and control resources, but they can't break the will to survive of people who've been surviving the unsurvivable their entire lives. I want to believe that. I want to believe my warnings will prepare people enough to make a difference. I want to believe the Commonwealth can organize a defense that holds long enough for other regions to join the fight. I want to believe Operation Hostile Takeover can be stopped or at least delayed, or at minimum made costly enough that the board reconsiders. But I also remember the simulation results, the projected casualty figures, the detailed invasion plans refined through decades of analysis. The board doesn't gamble on operations this important. They don't proceed unless their models show overwhelming probability of success. And their models show overwhelming probability of success. So maybe all I'm really doing is giving people a chance to die, understanding why it's happening instead of dying confused and terrified. Maybe that's all I can accomplish. Maybe that's enough. At least some people will know the truth. At least the board's crimes won't go completely unrecorded. At least someone will understand that the apocalypse wasn't random chaos, but calculated corporate policy. Find me in Diamond City or Good Neighbor before it's too late. The trader in the heavy coat who never stops shaking. The one who pays too much for maps and documents. The one who watches the sky obsessively. The one who flinches at cold temperatures even though everyone else enjoys them. I'm running out of time, but I'll share everything I know about fighting the ice with anyone willing to listen. And when the temperature drops 50 degrees overnight, when the storms come with mathematical precision, when the radiation concentrates in impossible patterns, when soldiers in adaptive camouflage emerge from the glowing sea, remember this warning. Remember that someone tried to tell you. Remember that the apocalypse isn't over. Remember that the architects are still out there, waiting beneath the ice, counting down to E-Day. Remember me, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Samuel Winters, the defector who tried to warn you, the climatologist who spent 40 years optimizing your extinction, the traitor who died trying to give you a chance to survive what's coming. The satellites are watching, the board is waiting, the ice is coming, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I helped them do to you. The worst part about knowing when the end is coming is watching everyone else go about their lives like nothing's wrong. I stand in Diamond City Market watching people haggle over Brahmin meat prices, complaining about the weather, gossiping about Mayor McDonough, and I want to scream at them. Don't you understand? In less than 8 years, probably less, this market will be empty. These people will be dead or integrated into Antarctic labor systems. This entire settlement will either be destroyed or converted into a corporate resource extraction facility. But I don't scream. I trade my salvage. I pay my rent. I maintain my cover as Samuel Winters, eccentric trader, because what good would screaming do? They just think I'm crazier than they already do. Security would escort me out. I'd lose my access to the settlements where I might actually find someone willing to listen. I've been documenting everything in written journals now, not just recordings. Paper survives better than holotapes in some ways. Harder to erase, harder to manipulate, harder to dismiss as corrupted data. I write in Antarctic technical notation first, the precise scientific language I spent 4 decades using, then translated into Wasteland common speech. Both versions matter. The technical specifications might convince someone with scientific training. The translated versions might reach regular people who need to understand the threat. Last week, I met a Brotherhood scribe named Niraya at the Cambridge police station. She was analyzing pre-war weather data, trying to understand climate patterns for some research project. I offered to help, thinking maybe this was my chance to show someone the mathematical evidence. We spent 3 hours going through her data together. I showed her the anomalies, the patterns that couldn't occur naturally, the storm trajectories that violated basic meteorological principles. She was fascinated, called it remarkable evidence of long-term atmospheric disruption from the Great War. She theorized that nuclear detonations had permanently altered weather systems in ways pre-war models hadn't predicted. She thanked me for the consultation, and asked if I'd be willing to review more data in the future. She completely missed the point, or maybe she understood it and couldn't accept the implications. Either way, another attempt to convince someone failed. I'm starting to understand why the board isn't worried about defectors spreading information. The truth is too big, too incomprehensible. People's minds reject it as impossible, even when the evidence is right in front of them. It's easier to believe in nuclear disruption or random climate variation than to believe in a secret Antarctic civilization controlling weather through satellites. The truth requires restructuring your entire understanding of the post-war world. Most people won't do that, can't do that. Their psychological frameworks can't accommodate that much cognitive dissonance. My health continues deteriorating. I collapsed in Good Neighbor 3 days ago, just walking down the street, and suddenly I was on the ground, vision tunneling, heart racing irregularly. Some drifters helped me to the third rail, where a doctor examined me. Not Sun this time, someone else, a ghoul named Edwards, who's been around since before the war. He took one look at my symptoms and asked me point blank if I was from the Institute. That threw me. I said no, honestly. He nodded slowly and said my cellular degradation pattern reminded him of some Institute experiments he'd heard about, synths whose organic components were breaking down from environmental incompatibility. He said whatever the Institute did to me, they'd screwed up my biology badly. He prescribed some kind of stabilizer he manufactures himself. Said it might help with the organ damage. I didn't correct his assumption. Let him think I'm a failed Institute experiment. It's closer to the truth than most people get. The stabilizer actually helps a little. The shaking is less severe. The chest pain has decreased. Maybe I'll get 3 years instead of 2. Maybe long enough to see if any of my warnings make a difference. Maybe long enough to see the first signs of Operation Hostile Takeover beginning. I'm not sure if that would be better or worse. Vindication would be cold comfort while watching people die. I've been mapping the glowing sea from a distance, using binoculars from elevated positions, trying to identify likely tunnel entrance locations. The board would have chosen somewhere geologically stable, relatively flat for construction access, but remote enough to avoid detection. There's a region in the southwestern glowing sea that fits those parameters. A shallow valley surrounded by hills, protected from the worst radiation storms, with rock formations that might conceal excavation work. I need to go there. Need to verify if the tunnel entrance exists. Need to see it with my own eyes before I die, so at least I'll know I wasn't completely crazy. But entering the glowing sea requires preparation I'm not sure my failing body can handle. The radiation levels will accelerate my cellular degradation. The physical exertion might trigger complete organ failure. I might make it to the valley and die before I can return to report what I found. But what am I saving my strength for? Dying slowly in Diamond City? I'm going to die anyway. Might as well die doing something useful. Might as well try to gather real evidence that might convince someone. Photographic documentation of a massive tunnel entrance in the glowing sea would be harder to dismiss than my testimony alone. I've been buying radiation protection gear. Power armor would be ideal, but I can't afford it and wouldn't know how to operate it properly anyway. Instead, I've assembled a hazmat suit, radiation medication, and enough supplies for a 3-day expedition. I leave tomorrow morning. If I don't return, the copies of my recordings and journals hidden across the Commonwealth will have to speak for themselves. Asterisk, asterisk. If you were in my position, would you risk a final expedition to gather proof, or would you spend your remaining time differently? What would you prioritize with limited time left? Asterisk, asterisk. Actually, that's a lie. I'm not leaving tomorrow morning. I left 3 days ago. I'm recording this final message from inside the glowing sea right now, sitting in the ruins of a collapsed building that provides minimal shelter from the radiation wind. My suit's rad counter is clicking steadily. I've already absorbed more rads than Sun would say is survivable, but I found it. I found the tunnel entrance. It's exactly where I predicted it would be. A massive circular opening in the valley floor, 50 meters in diameter, descending into darkness that my flashlight can't penetrate. The edges are reinforced with materials I recognize from Antarctic construction, metamaterials that can withstand incredible stress and heat. There's no door or barrier, just open access to a tunnel that slopes downward at a perfect 15-degree angle, exactly optimal for vehicle navigation. I took photographs, dozens of them from multiple angles, close-ups of the construction materials showing manufacturing marks that don't match any pre-war industrial standards, wide shots showing the scale, detailed images of the tunnel interior showing it's clearly maintained, not abandoned. The air coming up from below is cold, much colder than it should be at this depth, Antarctic cold, processed through thermal regulation systems. I tried to descend into the tunnel, but only made it about 50 meters before the cold became unbearable despite my hazmat suit. My body started shutting down, which seems ironic. Antarctic cold killing an Antarctic defector because my genetic modifications aren't functioning properly anymore. I retreated to the surface, and I've been here in these ruins for the last 6 hours, recording this message while I still can. My organ failure is accelerating. I can feel it happening. The kidney pain is excruciating. My heart rhythm is chaotic. I'm coughing blood regularly now. The radiation exposure has pushed my damaged systems past critical thresholds. I probably have hours left, not days, but I got the evidence. The photographs are stored on 3 separate holotapes hidden in my pack. Anyone who finds my body will find the evidence. I've marked my location on every map I'm carrying, drew arrows pointing toward the tunnel valley, wrote explicit instructions about what's there and why it matters, left my journals and recordings in waterproof containers tied to my body, made it as obvious as possible that someone needs to retrieve this information and distribute it. Someone will find me eventually, raiders or scavengers, or maybe Brotherhood patrols. Someone will take my gear and hopefully look at what I've documented. The board is probably tracking my life signs right now through the satellite network. They know I'm dying in the glowing sea. They're probably discussing whether to send a retrieval team for my body or just let the Wasteland dispose of me. I hope they decide I'm not worth retrieving. I hope they leave my body here with the evidence intact. I hope someone finds it before the radiation makes the documents unreadable. I can see the stars from here. The ruins have a collapsed section of roof that opens to the sky. Platform 12 Beta just passed overhead on its complex orbital pattern. I've watched it my whole life. First from Dome 7, where it was a tool I used to manipulate weather. Now from the glowing sea, where it's a reminder of everything I tried to stop. The satellite is beautiful in its way. Perfect engineering, perfect execution, perfectly evil. I wonder if the board will abort Operation Hostile Takeover now that I've found the tunnel. Probably not. One defector finding one entrance doesn't compromise the overall strategy. They have 11 other Citadel domes with their own deployment plans. They can shift resources, adjust timelines, modify approaches. The operation has too much momentum to stop because of one dying woman's final act of defiance. But maybe the evidence I've gathered will plant seeds. Maybe someone will believe the photographs. Maybe the Brotherhood will investigate. Maybe they'll discover the true scale of what's coming. Maybe they'll start preparing defenses. Maybe my death will accomplish what my life couldn't. Maybe that's the best I could hope for. I've been thinking about my sister a lot as I'm dying, Miranda. She was 4 years younger than me, brilliant in her own right, specializing in oceanic thermal dynamics. We were close as children, despite the board's efforts to minimize family bonds in favor of corporate loyalty. We used to sneak into the observation domes late at night and watch the aurora australis together, making up stories about the surface world we'd never seen. She disappeared when she was 32. Official records said she died in a laboratory accident, but I found her medical file in the same archives where I found Director Sarah Chen's neural restructuring documentation. Miranda had questioned Project Longwinter's ethics during a review meeting. suggested maybe the board should be trying to help surface populations recover instead of keeping them suppressed. 2 weeks later, laboratory accident, no body recovered. Neural patterns, archived for potential future reconstruction, they erased her. My brilliant little sister who just wanted to help people, they erased her and kept her brain scan in storage like a backup file that might be useful someday. That's what finally broke through my indoctrination. Not the casualty projections, or the invasion plans, or the weather manipulation, finding out they'd murdered my sister for asking ethical questions. Finding out her consciousness might still exist somewhere in Antarctic data storage, preserved but not alive, a digital ghost waiting for a purpose the board might never give her. I wanted to ask her what I should do, if I should defect, if I should try to warn the surface, if I should fight the board from inside or outside. But all I had was her archived neural scan that I couldn't access, couldn't talk to, couldn't comfort or be comforted by. So I made the decision alone. I stole a submarine. I came to the Commonwealth. I've been trying to warn people for 9 months. And now I'm dying in radioactive ruins with evidence that probably won't change anything. But at least I tried. At least I didn't spend my final years optimizing the extinction of people my sister would have wanted to save. At least when I die, it'll be as Elena Vasquez who defected, not as Dr. Vasquez who obeyed. That has to count for something. That has to mean something. The pain is getting worse. My chest feels like it's being crushed. My vision is blurring. My hands can barely hold the recording device anymore. I don't have much time left, so let me say what needs to be said while I still can. To whoever finds this message and my body, the photographs in my pack are real. The tunnel in the valley is real. The Antarctic threat is real. Take the evidence to Elder Maxon aboard the Pridewin. Show him the construction materials that don't match any known pre-war technology. Show him the mathematical impossibility of the tunnel's precision engineering. Show him proof that someone with advanced capabilities is preparing for surface operations. Make him listen, make him believe, make him prepare. To Preston Garvey and the Minutemen, you're the Commonwealth's best hope for coordinated defense. Start building those underground shelters now. Start forming broader alliances now. Start preparing for weather warfare now. You have maybe 8 years, maybe less. Use them wisely. Don't wait for proof. By the time proof is undeniable, it'll be too late. To Desdemona and the Railroad, your infiltrator identification techniques can be adapted to find Antarctic scouts. They're better trained than Institute synths, but they have tells. Medical knowledge too, advanced. Navigation too precise. Emotional responses too controlled. Start sweeping the Commonwealth now. Find them before Operation Hostile Takeover begins. They're reporting your every move back to the board. To the Institute, I know you're not popular with other factions. I know you have your own agenda. But the Antarctic threat affects you too. The board knows you exist. They have files on your capabilities. They've decided you're either potential partners or obstacles to be eliminated. Either way, you need to prepare. Your underground facilities might protect you from initial weather assault, but Antarctic forces will come for the Institute eventually. You have technology that could make a difference. Use it to help the Commonwealth defend itself. Please. To the ordinary people of Diamond City and Good Neighbor and every settlement across the Commonwealth, when the storms come, when the temperature drops impossibly fast, when soldiers in strange armor emerge from the glowing sea, remember that someone tried to warn you. Remember that the apocalypse isn't over. Remember that you survived 2 centuries of nuclear winter, and you can survive this too. Work together. Help each other. Don't let the board break your will to resist. You're stronger than they think you are. You're stronger than I thought you were when I was helping plan your extinction. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. I can hear something in the distance. Engines maybe. Aircraft. Could be Brotherhood vertibird. Could be scavengers with working vehicles. Could be Antarctic retrieval team coming for my body. I hope it's not the board. I hope they leave me here. I hope someone from the Commonwealth finds me first. The cold is spreading through my body now, not the environmental cold from the glowing sea. The cold of dying, of organs shutting down, of blood stopping, of consciousness fading. It's not painful anymore. That's probably a bad sign. They say when hypothermia kills you, the final stage is warmth. A false sense of comfort as your brain misfires and tells you everything is fine. I wonder if organ failure has a similar phenomenon. This strange, peaceful feeling as everything stops working. I can see Miranda in my mind, 8 years old, laughing as we ran through Dome 7's artificial parks, before the board separated us, before they taught us to value corporate advancement over family bonds, before they killed her for asking questions, before I became the person who designed weather systems to kill people like her, before everything went wrong. I'm sorry, Miranda. I'm sorry I didn't question things sooner. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I helped the board do terrible things before I understood what I was doing. I'm sorry my defection and warnings probably won't change anything. I'm sorry I'm dying alone in radioactive ruins without accomplishing much. I'm sorry for all of it, but I tried. That's all I can say. I tried to stop what's coming. I tried to warn people. I tried to gather evidence. I tried to make the Commonwealth understand the threat. I tried to be better than the person the board made me. I tried to honor your memory by fighting against everything they stand for. I tried. The engines are getting closer. Definitely aircraft. The sound is wrong for vertebrates, though. More efficient propulsion. Quieter. That's Antarctic technology. They're coming for me after all. The board never leaves defectors unaccounted for, even dying ones. Even ones who've already failed to accomplish anything meaningful. They'll retrieve my body, erase the evidence, make sure my warnings die with me. I'm hiding the holotapes now, burying them in the rubble, 3 separate locations in these ruins. Different depths, different positions. Even if the board takes my body and my pack, maybe they'll miss the holotapes. Maybe someone will find them later. Maybe my photographs of the tunnel will survive. Maybe my warnings will reach someone eventually. Maybe I'm not completely failing after all. The aircraft is overhead now. I can see it through the collapsed roof. It's not a vertibird. It's a transport pod, the kind used for Antarctic orbital insertion. Smooth metallic hull that shifts colors to match the sky. No visible engines, but perfect maneuvering control. It's landing nearby. They'll be here in minutes. I need to finish this message quickly. Need to record the most important thing before they take me. The thing I should have said from the beginning but was afraid to reveal because it made me too vulnerable. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I was senior climatologist for Project Long Winter, Board Level 7 clearance, Antarctic Free State Dome 7. I designed the weather systems that have been killing you for decades. I helped plan the invasion that's coming in 8 years or less. I spent 41 years being a monster before I understood what I was doing. And I've spent 9 months trying to atone by warning you about what's coming. But here's what really matters. Here's what I need you to understand. The board thinks they've won already. They think the surface is full of scattered primitives who'll submit or die when Operation Hostile Takeover begins. They're wrong. I've seen what you're capable of. I've watched the Minutemen rebuild from nothing. I've seen Diamond City maintain civilization in impossible conditions. I've witnessed the railroad fight overwhelming odds. I've observed the Brotherhood's military capability. I've met ordinary people who survive every day through courage and cooperation and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. You can fight them. You can win. Not easily, not without terrible losses. But you can win because you have something the board doesn't understand and can't replicate. You have real human connection born from shared struggle. You have loyalty that isn't programmed or conditioned. You have the kind of strength that comes from surviving the unsurvivable for 2 centuries. The board thinks that makes you weak. They're wrong. It makes you incredibly strong. So when they come, when the storms hit and the soldiers emerge and everything seems hopeless, remember what you've already survived. Remember that you've been living in post-nuclear hell for 200 years and you're still here. Remember that the board's people live in comfortable domes and have never faced real adversity. Remember that desperation and determination beat training and technology when both sides are willing to fight hard enough. And remember that at least one person from Antarctica thought you were worth dying for, thought you were worth defecting for, thought you deserved a warning and a chance to prepare and a fighting chance against what's coming. Remember that the board isn't unanimous. Remember that even in Antarctic citadels, some people still have consciences. Remember that you're not alone even. If it feels like you are, they're here. I can see 3 figures in adaptive camouflage approaching the ruins, weapons drawn, moving with perfect tactical precision. This is it. This is the end. They're going to take me back to Dome 1 for neural restructuring, or maybe they'll just kill me here and dispose of the body. Either way, Elena Vasquez ends today, but Samuel Winters might survive. The traitor personality I created might live on in the stories people tell. The crazy guy who warned about Antarctica, the eccentric merchant who paid too much for maps, the defector who died in the glowing sea trying to prove his warnings were real. Maybe that's enough. Maybe being remembered as crazy but sincere is better than being forgotten completely. I love you, Miranda. I'm sorry I couldn't save the world you wanted to help. I'm sorry I helped destroy it instead. I hope somehow you know I tried to fix it at the end. I hope your consciousness in that archived neural scan, if it's aware at all, knows I didn't forget you, knows I tried to honor your memory, knows I became the person you wanted me to be, just 40 years too late. I love you, Commonwealth. I know that sounds strange coming from someone who helped hurt you, but I do. I love your stubborn refusal to give up. I love your communities built in impossible places. I love your courage and your cooperation and your determined survival. You deserved better than the board gave you. You deserved better than I gave you when I was working for them. You deserve the chance to choose your own future instead of having it dictated by corporate oligarchs hiding beneath the ice. Fight them. Please fight them. Don't submit when they offer you food and shelter. Don't believe their promises that Antarctic rule will be better than Wasteland freedom. Don't let them break you. Fight them with everything you have. Fight them for 200 years of suffering they caused. Fight them for every person who died in storms I designed. Fight them for Miranda and everyone else the board erased. Fight them because you're still human and they forgot how to be. The soldiers are inside the ruins now. I can hear their footsteps. They're moving slowly, methodically, clearing each room. They'll find me in minutes. This is really it. This is really the end. I'm going to stop recording now and face whatever comes next. The holotapes are buried. The evidence is hidden. My message is complete. To whoever finds this, to whoever listens to these confessions, to whoever takes my warnings seriously, thank you. Thank you for listening to a dying defector's final testimony. Thank you for considering the possibility that I'm telling the truth. Thank you for maybe, possibly, preparing for what's coming. Thank you for fighting when the time comes. Thank you for surviving. The door to this room just opened. I can see their weapons. I can see their armor shifting colors to match the ruins. I can see their perfect tactical formation. This is the last thing I'll ever record, the last words Elena Vasquez will ever speak. So let me end with the truth. The ice is coming. The board is waiting. Operation Hostile Takeover will begin in 8 years or less. You can survive it if you prepare now. You can win if you fight together. You can beat them because you're stronger than they know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I did before I understood. I'm sorry for the storms and the cold and the death. I'm sorry I didn't defect sooner. I'm sorry my warnings might not be enough. I'm sorry I'm dying before I could do more. I'm sorry for all of it, but I tried. In the end, I tried. My name is Elena Vasquez. I was the monster who designed your weather, and I died trying to save you from the monsters I used to serve. Remember me. Remember this warning. Remember what's coming. The ice is coming.